Hello, everyone. I would like to introduce you to Zappy and Daisy, two American pickens that we adopted somewhat unexpectedly, but we did not have a pond, so it's time to get building. I started by choosing an area. I chose the west side of my house and I started marking it out. I chose this spot because it's shaded during the hottest part of the day, so in the summertime, that will be really nice for the ducks. After marking my area, my husband kindly dug the first few scoops out with his Kubota in order to get me started. That way I can focus more on shaping. I knew that I wanted a deep portion of the pond with a shallower portion that ramps out so the ducks would have easy access getting in and out. Day 2, I started to really shape the pond, and this went fairly easily. This dirt was pretty soft, but after I got the first couple of layers and I started digging the deeper portion of the pond, I ran into some natural concrete, and this was a bugger to get through. It took me a really long time because it was just breaking up a lot of pieces like this, and eventually I did get it done though. Once I had everything shaped, I stamped everything into place to make sure the dirt was nice and compacted before laying out my pond liner. This was a $127 pond liner that I bought at Lowe's. It is one of the more expensive ones, but that's because I wanted to have one that was really thick. This feels a lot like rubber. And since this is going to be used for animals and I have children, I wanted to make sure that it would last a long time without leaking, especially in Arizona because water doesn't really hold very well here. Once I had everything laid out, I did realize that I had a significant amount on the back end. So I ended up taking down that greenhouse and digging out about another 2 feet more at the back end of the pond and just created another shallow shelf. But this was the end of day 2. So I went ahead and began filling the pond just because I didn't want my liner to blow away in these spring winds. This did take quite a bit of time, but then I started marking the edge of my pond and added some beneficial bacteria to help prevent, again, algae growth. Then, once I had my edges established, I started taking dirt and putting it around the edges and compacting it. And I will also water this down to make sure that it doesn't move. We're not trying to spend a bunch of money on this pond, so we had this rock that we had scraped from our driveway that's just mixed with a bunch of dirt. So I had the idea of separating the rocks from the dirt and using it as the ramp for the pond so that the ducks weren't just trafficking a bunch of dirt back into the pond. My original idea was to put it in a basket and then water it down to separate the dirt, but this ended up taking a really long time and was just not an efficient way of doing it. So after the first load, I ended up putting everything into a wheelbarrow, filling it up all the way with the rocks and doing it that way. It went a lot faster, but it was difficult to film it, so I'll just show you pictures of the finished product. Our ramp is done, and that's the end of day 3. Day 4, before I decided to put the animals in here, I knew that I needed to create a filtration system. But after looking into the price of filters that can support livestock like ducks, they're really expensive. Some were over $1,000. So I decided to build one on my own. I started by taking this old coarse trough that we were not using, and I created a slanted platform for it to sit on. I grabbed some river rock. I bought this bag of river rock for about $5 at Lowe's, and this is just because I needed some cleaner rock to do this with, and I really didn't want to separate the rock that we already had, especially because I had other uses for it. Then I have these Aspen, they're actually air conditioning filters, but they're just kind of made out of straw, so I used several of those and layered them and put more rock in between each layer. Then I took this hose and put it through the bottom. And this is going to be what the pump is attached to. The pump I bought for $90. I also got that at Lowe's. And each of the filters were $4 a piece. And then I had this can of waterfall sealant. But as soon as I started trying to spray it, I realized that the can was broken and it was spilling out the sides, and I ended up having to do it with my finger. So I was not able to film that because it was a very messy process. This is what it looked like. I made the mistake of trying to wash it off my hands with water, but it's waterproof, and my hands are still black. We'll put it that way. So this is just some pictures of me doing the layering. I layered several of these together. I think I put 4 all together. I may go in and add more later, but for right now, it seems to be doing the trick. I'll fill this up with water, and now it's time to introduce our duckies. I'll probably go later and build maybe a garden box around the horse trough just to make it look a little bit nicer. But right now it's doing its job and it's actually working out really well. It's keeping the water very clean. And I even put some goldfish in there and they seem to be happy as well. That's the end of day 5. The next thing that I had to do was start landscaping around the pond. I had all of these rocks that we had dug up from around our property, and my husband was helping put dirt around it, and some got in the pond. What a bummer. I thought that it would take forever for me to get that bucket of dirt out of there, but lo and behold, the filtration system worked and the water was clear within about an hour or so. Now there is still some dirt that's kind of sank to the bottom that's not really moving, and that's okay. I can get that out later, but for right now, at least the water is clean. Now we're being a little bit more careful. We're dumping the dirt a little bit further away and then just shoveling it closer and packing it down. We had some trees that fell down in a storm, so since my husband cut some of those up, I decided to use some of those for landscaping as well, and the rest of the rocks that I didn't use on the ramp. I have a lot to do to make this pond look aesthetically pleasing, but the fact is that to get this done, and we needed it to be cost effective, especially because we were not planning to inherit these ducks, so it's not exactly something that we budgeted for. By the time I was finished building this pond, I had only spent a little over $250 on the entire project. We will build a fence around that, and that will be a little bit more money, but the pond itself was fairly cheap to build, and I love it. The ducks are super happy, and even the fish like it. Thank you so much for watching.